Hi, I'm Sid. I'm the CEO and co-founder at GitLab. Today, we're going to talk about building a distributed company. I'll be interviewed by Sunil. Sunil, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Sunil Kalgi, the founder and CEO of Outclip. So Outclip is a screen recording tool that integrates seamlessly into your workflow by connecting to third-party apps like YouTube and GitLab. It's used by remote teams, and the top use cases are things like video bug reports, how-to videos for customer support, as well as video feedback. So we're working on taking remote work collaboration to the next level. So Sid, I'm an early stage startup founder, and I think quite a bit about whether I want to set up my company as an all remote company or one with a physical office. Now, looking at GitLab, so you're an all remote company with over a 500 member organization distributed over 50 countries. So this clearly shows that all remote companies can scale to a fairly large size. So I want to focus this Q&A on building a distributed company. And I want to start at the very beginning. So GitLab was originally an open source project, and you and your co-founder Dimitri got together and started the company in 2012. So I want to ask you, so what were your reasons for setting up GitLab as an all remote company?
Yeah, when we and Dimitri came together, it was working together and stuff, but not actually being physically together. He was in the Ukraine, I was in the Netherlands. And our first team member, apart from us two, was Madin, and he lived in Serbia. So it was impractical to meet up physically. And then we added a few Dutch team members. I lived in the Netherlands. They came to my place. I had a spare desk for a few times, but then they started working from home. We kind of never discussed it, and they kind of figured they could be effective from home too. I think most companies, you co-locate, like you keep showing up to the office because otherwise you're missing out on information, on career opportunities. As long as you make sure that's not the case, then people feel fine working from home. So that's how we became a remote company.
And how did you collaborate in the early days? Like, you can take us back to 2012 in terms of what did product development look like? What are the challenges in remote development, as well as the advantages working as a remote team?
Yeah, we used a lot of the same things we use today. I think that time it was Campfire instead of Slack. It was Google Hangouts instead of Zoom. But those two, Google Docs, and of course, we were already using a bit of GitLab back then.
And how did you hire your first few employees, given that you were already a founding team that was remote?
Yeah, so Madden, I knew from a previous company, and so that's how we got in touch. Other people, I met one at a Ruby meetup. One reached out after I left a job, which I previously done. So kind of people in my immediate network.
And how did you do sales in the early days? Did you travel a lot to your customer locations in order to close sales and so on?
I traveled very little. So it was a lot of inbound. Basically, we started creating an offering, and a lot of people already running GitLab. So they signed themselves up. So in the beginning, it was very inbound driven based on the success of the open source product.
Okay. And did you ever consider co-locating the team when you were starting up?
Yeah, for sure. We were co-located during Y Combinator. We all lived in the same house together. That was pretty intense. We never want to live together, we decided, but we weren't against having an office, especially since the people at Y Combinator said, look, it's totally normal to have a distributed engineering team, but we know of no successful companies that are all remote. So you probably should get an office and have sales and marketing and finance there. We said, well, that makes a lot of sense. So we got an office, we put it full with desks. Then like our salesperson, he showed up the first 2 days and then he started working from home. That's kind of the story. Every time we hired someone, they showed up a few days and then they kind of started working from home because it was possible.
And did you ever consider to kind of run it as in hybrid mode where part of the team's co-located, maybe not where you're located, but maybe in a different city where a lot of your team members are? Or did you always want to keep it going as an all remote company?
Well, we saw hybrid as a risk because what you get if those people are adopting a co-located office culture where there's less recordings of things, where there's less digital artifacts, it's going to be hard for the rest of the company to kind of figure out what's there. What I see in hybrid companies is that the remote people have less access to information. Like they didn't know a decision was made. How was it made? Oh, well, we met in the hallway. We grabbed the people that were around. We talked it through and we figured it out. And we didn't document it anywhere. And there's no video of the recording. So it's way easier to run an all remote company than a hybrid company. And there's some hybrid companies that say, we're going to stop with remote work. And I can imagine, because if your primary process is co-located, it's very hard to be effective remotely. And I think even a few people co-located already make it harder to kind of institute the best practices. And now we do have some people co-located, I think, because there's some people in Denver, and I think there's on days that they get together, there's a few people in that office, but it's not a specific team or anything. And even for us, it's pretty hard to enforce all the things that are important already. Like we're all remote and still it's hard to do the right thing. And I don't envy people that run a company with a mix because it will be even harder.
Now, once you founded a startup and it's getting traction, you're going to scale it. So I want to next talk about like growing a team in an all remote company. So remote work requires quite a different attitude to work, right? Because you have to be communicative and productive without the luxury of in-person interaction. So what is the right personality type for remote work, and how do you screen for that when you're hiring people?
Yeah, I don't think it requires a different personality type. We hire all kinds of people. I think a few things are important. One is a focus on results. So especially for managers, it's important that they don't focus on the input of people. How long did you work, or things like that are I don't think that's healthy in any company, but especially remote, you have to let that go. You have to focus on the output of someone, not on the input. The other thing is we like people who are managers of one. They don't need someone to prompt them to say it to finish a task. Like when they say they're going to do something, they deliver. I think that's healthy in any company, but it's especially great if you're remote. You're gonna no one's going to look over your shoulder whether you're on Facebook or not. And it's fine if you're on Facebook, as long as you deliver the work to a reasonable degree.
And how do you go about finding potential hires? Is there a secret recipe for hiring for an all remote company?
I think the superpower, and it's not secret, is that you can hire in a lot more places. We can hire 90% of the world's population. And that's a superpower because it makes hiring way easier. And because we're an open source project and we're pretty transparent, people all over the world sometimes are like, hey, this is an interesting company to work for. Like I looked into their handbook. I was amazed at what I saw. I actually want to work there. Like this is a better fit with my values than the company I'm currently at. And it's great that wherever they are, they don't have to move to make that happen. They can stay where they are and join us.
And how do you conduct interviews with employees who are possibly based internationally?
Yeah, just like we're sitting here now. I'm on video calls more than 6 hours every day.
Okay. And do you ever do in-person interviews?
Yeah, if the person is local, we tend to do in person.
Okay. And was there, and is there any difference to how you were interviewing in the early days versus now? I'm sure you've evolved a lot of practices for interviewing and so on. What kind of traits helped in like early days hires versus today, for instance?
Yeah, I did all our interviews up until I think 140 hires. So kind of until Dimbar's number. And back then we didn't always get everything right. So I had people like fill out a huge sheet with or form with all kinds of questions beforehand. So I got all those questions. I read through those, and then I asked questions if the answers weren't clear to me. pretty intense, high velocity interview, but we've improved a lot. We have way better interviewers before me now, so I don't do interviews like that anymore. So most of my interviews are now with executives, and that's most of the time it's a broader ranging conversation, and it's also a lot like figuring out what they want, whether the job is a good fit. That's important in any interview, but with executive interviews, that's a bigger part of the conversation. And I have them ask way more questions. Most interviews I do, we spend more time on their questions than on mine, and I get a lot of information to what they ask about and what their follow-up questions are.
And are there any challenges you run into when you're interviewing remotely, trying to ascertain whether a candidate is right for the company?
I think not a lot of problems. There's sometimes some small technical difficulties, but I suppose someone would come in person. You spend a few minutes on other things as well, so I don't think it's less efficient. Some people don't have a proper audio setup, but I have a proper one, so we can deal with one person being on speakerphone. Yeah, nothing really that bothers me. I think it's actually more convenient because I have a screen. I'm on a screen, so I can quickly take notes. I have a keyboard, and I got the resume, and if I want to check out a company, I can do so. If I'm in person, I have to make sure all my materials are kind of preloaded on an iPad beforehand, because it's hard to navigate during the interview and taking notes. They tend to be analogs. Afterwards, I have to like scan them or do something else. So although I think it's good to see someone in person, I think the efficiency-wise, the remote ones are really great.
Next, I want to talk about travel. I think you mentioned previously that you do not actually travel that much on work. Could you tell us about how much travel is generally involved in running an all-remote company?
Yeah, so I travel about once a month. About 2/3 of that is for the company, and 1/3 is pleasure. Well, traveling for the company is pleasure too, but I should say pay time off. And it's maybe, for example, visiting customers in New York. So then I go there for a couple of days. Most of the time we try to combine it with a conference. So conferences, and of course every 9 months we got our own GitLab Contribute Summit where everyone from the company gets together.
Next, any company, especially in startup mode, needs to operate really quickly. They need to move fast. So how do you move fast as an all-remote company? There's always a challenge, right? Because if you're in the same room, you can whiteboard things, hash things out quickly. Whereas in remote, you might have somebody working in a different time zone. So the general question around how do you maintain that momentum as an all-remote company?
Yeah, so the synchronous communication where you're all looking at the same thing are important. So we do have meetings. It's hard to involve people from Asia Pacific in those, so that's a problem. There's enough overlap between kind of Europe and the US to make those meetings happen. I don't miss whiteboards that much. I really prefer Google Docs nowadays. Google Docs, the nice thing is we use numbered lists, we use indentation a lot. There's always space, like you never run out of space. It's there for people to view afterwards. Everyone can type. There's not one person standing there, but everyone has their own cursor. So I actually think Google Docs is superior to a whiteboard. If I had to give one up, I'd keep the Google Doc, and we're using that very effectively. Every meeting has kind of an agenda up front, and then we just fill in all those things as we go along, and we've gotten really good at that.
Another challenge with any company is alignment, where you want every team member to be aligned with the company's direction, and often things are misunderstood, and that happens even in co-located companies. So I'm curious how you solve that problem in GitLab, where you try to align everybody and have their compasses pointing in a particular direction so you can all march forward.
Yeah, I think it's really important to write things down. People are very efficient at reading things. If you wrote it down, you can refer to it. So you can you don't have to say everything again. You can just drop a link. So we write down a lot in our handbook, on our OKRs page. You'll find all our goals, our strategy, etc. And then it's important that you keep repeating that you keep dropping those links and that you keep answering questions. So repetition is still needed, but the repetition is easier if you have one write-up, and most people have already found it even during onboarding.
So GitLab is a very international company. There are team members spread across 50 plus countries. So questions around how do you manage the specifics of every location, things like international income tax, payroll, healthcare, benefits. How do you do it in the early days, and how do you do it now? I'm sure you have a lot more resources to manage it now, but you can shed light on it.
In the beginning, we had kind of a Dutch and a US entity. Everyone else was kind of a contractor. Right now, we have more entities. I think we're up to 6 countries now that cover the majority of the team. We're working with other organizations where they're the employer of record. We're sometimes hiring people through, for example, resellers and distributors. So there's more solutions now in place, and we got a way bigger part of the team where they have a traditional employer relationship.
And also, how do you deal with being an international organization? There's people from different cultures participating, and how do you deal with things like performance problems, and what are some of the red flags you look out for?
Yeah, so underperformance is tough. I think it's a hard thing for any company. You can Google GitLab underperformance. You'll find some of our materials. One of the things we do is we give everyone a boss that understands what they do. So we don't do cross-functional teams. Your team is composed of people that perform a similar role, and your boss is your manager, someone who has experience with that role. So they'll be able to assess your results. They'll be able to coach you. They'll be able to give you career advice. I think that's a very important thing. Other than that, we stress to everyone the importance of if someone's underperforming to identify it, have the conversation, and take remediative actions. Luckily, we have a great retention at the company. We retain 90% of the people year over year. But it is something that you cannot be a manager at GitLab if you're not willing and to identify and remedy underperformance.
So I've heard about GitLab's annual team retreats, where you fly all your members to a resort location. So when did you start this practice, and how important is it, and what do you do at these retreats?
So we started it pretty early. Remember, our first employee was from Serbia. He invited us over, and I think we were 2 cars. So I think we were there was a bunch of SOs. I think we were like five team members and 3 or 4 SOs at the time. And it was great. We went to Novi Sad, Serbia. We went to the capital. We had a great time. And I think 9 months later, we did it again, another location, and we just kept that thing going every 9 months. And I look forward to the next one. In May, we're going to New Orleans, and super looking forward to it.
How do you give your employees recognition, right? Because I mean, if you're co-located, you can always give someone a pat on the back, go give them a gift card. But you have somebody sitting internationally. How do you give recognition in your company?
Yeah, giving recognition is really important. And actually, we have an L group, a leader group at GitLab, which we give in the assignment now, like how can we get even better at this? But some of the things we do is a thank you channel. So last year we had more than 4,000 thank yous in that channel where people got mentioned. We had 90% of the people in the company got at least one thank you through that channel. This morning we just instituted values icon emojis. So we'll have emojis for each one of our values. So Normally, there's a lot of emojis under these thank yous, and we'll add that. Another thing we do is discretionary bonuses. This morning, I think we had a couple. I think it was more than 3 discretionary bonuses were awarded. We do it in the company call, where everyone is present, and we state like who's getting a bonus and for what reason. So we tend to be very high velocity with those, and those people get $1,000 and the recognition that this implies.
So next, I want to talk about kind of getting capital investment in your company and fundraising. So were there any challenges you ran into, because it's an atypical company running it because it's all remote? Were there any challenges in fundraising for your company?
Yes, investors don't like it. We had one of the best VC firms in the world say, look, we like everything about this except the remote thing. We don't say it won't work, but it's different than other companies. And we see every deal. So, and they do, they're one of the best. And we can just pick a company that just fits all the boxes instead of this one not. And that makes sense for them, but it was a big bummer for us. Would have loved to work with them. Other investors said the same thing. Look, if you're going to get acquired, we're going to get half the price because you're remote, and not all the people will transfer to the new organization. So if it gets acquired, it's a worse investment. We said, look, you're going to be aligned with us because we want to stay independent. We want to try to go for an IPO, but it did make fundraising harder.
And what are some of the particular advantages or disadvantages when competing with, I'm sure there are a lot of other companies in your space, when competing with other companies that are working in co-located mode?
Yeah, I think talent is the biggest advantage. Where other companies are restricted to a few metro areas, we can hire people that move back to be close to their family. So they maybe worked in a metro area for a while, they move back, they're now in a rural area, and like they have the opportunity to work with a fast growing unicorn startup where remote people are first class. That is a super good deal for them, and we attract our above average share of very talented people.
Now the general advice from Y Combinator is be where your customers are. So does it matter where the founder is based?
I think it's really important to be where your customers are. So our customers are on the internet. So we're on the internet. And it might sound a bit lame, but for example, our issue trackers don't distinguish between whether someone is a user, a customer, or a team member. So we have people at GitLab working on a new feature, and they say, look, who's this team member? I don't know. I couldn't find their name in our directory. We're like, it's probably not a team member. It's probably a user or customer that cares a lot about what you're building. So every feature request, everything we're working on is out there in the open on a level playing field. So I think we have a lot more interaction with our customers than other companies. Now, I'm located in San Francisco, and I think that's important too. There's a lot of events here. This week, I was going to a financial conference. Those are organized here. There's press is here. There's a lot of people I need to interact with, and a lot of events are here in the city. So I feel that it's useful to be here. And I think San Francisco is more and more going to be a city of headquarters of the startups, but with most of the work being done elsewhere.
So was there any resistance from customers in the early days about buying product from a company that doesn't have an office?
Remarkably little. That wasn't a problem. They want to see your business listing. They want an address and things like that. But if you can provide that, there's no problem.
And I imagine now that you've grown to a much larger size, you probably have bigger enterprises that are buying your product. I mean, how receptive are they to kind of buying something from an all remote company? I'm talking about the really big companies and enterprises.
Yeah, they don't see a big problem with them. Okay. I think in general, if it's a really large enterprise, most of the meetings you're going to have are at their location. They're used to the seller comes to the purchaser. So in general, you're going to meet up there.
So my last couple of questions are kind of more on kind of the focus on the founder. So what are some of the good personal habits to be an effective remote company founder that have served you well?
Yeah, write things down and make sure that's enforced throughout the company. We have that thank you channel. And there's a thing, like if you thank a person for something, make sure there's a link to the work they did. Like people might be interested in, like curious, like, hey, you're celebrating their work. Make sure that people are able to see the work. And remarkably hard to do. Like today I said, like, hey, can you please add a link to that? So it keeps like consistent reinforcing of, hey, we write things down. We make sure things are cross-linked. We make sure that we make things public by default. We use a public channel and mention someone there instead of sending a direct message. So all these things that require constant kind of repeating from the top, that is important.
Do you have any other advice you want to give founders about starting an all remote company? Would you advise them to go ahead and start it as all remote? And what are some of the pitfalls to watch out for, and as well as some of the benefits you can gain? If you can just summarize all of that.
Yeah, I think we talked about the benefits. I think another benefit is that if you start a company in San Francisco, the compensation is going to be way higher than if you have you spread people around the globe. I think a pitfall is you should spend some time as the founding team to really get to know and trust each other. So you probably want to go off for a few weeks. We had that Y Combinator experience that really helped. If that's not the case, I hear of some companies who are like meeting up for a week every month, where they get together and work from the same office. So there's something to being in person that generates trust. So I wouldn't underestimate that in the beginning.
So that kind of completes all the questions I have. Did I miss anything out? I mean, are there any important areas about running a remote company which we didn't touch upon, but something that people should know about?
Yeah, today we have a breakout call every day with kind of the same group 4 times a week. And someone thanked me for, like, he had his baby on his lap, and he was like, it's so awesome, like, that I get to spend way more time with this kid than I see people around me being able to do. So I think there's just huge benefits for employees and for society. We talked about my perspective as a CEO, but it's just great to see that people have more time because they don't need to commute, that they spend have more time with the people that are important in their lives. I think for society, there's a lot too, to like, we spread wealth more across the globe, and if you're only located in San Francisco already has enough high-paying jobs. It's very important that they spread across the globe. Traffic is already bad enough as it is. The less people commuting, the better. And the environment benefits too. Like, it saves building that office, and it saves the commute. So I think there's a lot to like about remote work for society at large.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and answering all my questions about starting an all remote company.
Yeah, thanks for the interview.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.